Hi, I'm Rowan, and this is the story of how I lost my mother twice. The first time, she died. The second was when my father showed up to her funeral, smiling, holding the hand of a woman my age. Right there, beside my mother's casket, he looked at me and said, "You're no longer my son." And just like that, I was erased. They moved into her house before the dirt on her grave had even settled, took down her photos, locked my childhood room, told the neighbors I'd never come back, but I did. And when they returned from their honeymoon, still laughing, still proud, they saw me standing there. What happened next? Wiped the smile off both their faces. Do you want to know what was buried in my mother's garden? The sky hung heavy with gray that morning, the kind of November air that seeps through your jacket no matter how tightly you pull it closed. I stood beside my mother's coffin, my hands stiff and numb. The priest's voice floated over the cemetery, soft and rehearsed. The ground smelled of damp leaves and soil, and somewhere behind me a car engine idled, too loud for a funeral. I kept my eyes on the wooden casket. Elaine Keene, my mother. The only person who ever believed I'd grow into something good. She used to tell me, "Rowan, your father only understands control. Don't let his coldness become yours." I thought I understood what she meant until that day. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, and instinct told me to look up. My father, Walter, had arrived late. He wore a black suit that looked recently pressed, the kind of detail he'd never cared about when Mom was alive. But it wasn't the suit that froze the air. It was the woman beside him. She couldn't have been more than 30. Her hair was too shiny, her smile too steady. Her hand clung to his arm like she was staking a claim. When the crowd noticed her, whispers rippled through them like a breeze over wheat. Walter didn't look at the coffin. He looked straight at me. His voice cut through the murmurs, steady, deep, cruelly clear. "You're no longer my son. Be gone before we come back." For a moment, even the priest went silent. The sound of a crow nearby broke the stillness, but no one moved. I didn't answer. Couldn't. I felt the blood drain from my face, the wind slice at my ears. But none of it mattered, compared to that sentence. My father had spoken my exile into the world as if it were a blessing. I turned away, before my knees could betray me. As I walked toward the car, I could feel eyes following me. Neighbors, distant cousins, people who would later whisper, "I heard what he said to his boy." The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, and each step felt heavier than the last. In the car, I sat for a long moment before turning the key. Mom's scarf lay on the passenger seat, folded neatly, the faint smell of her lavender perfume still clinging to it. She made me promise once. Keep peace with your father, no matter what. At the time, it felt like wisdom. Now it felt like a curse. The drive home was quiet. Trees blurred past, skeletal and bare. Every stoplight seemed to take an hour. When I finally parked across from my mother's house, the house she'd spent her life tending, I saw the windows dark and lifeless. It didn't feel like home anymore. I sat there as the day drained into night. My breath fogged the windshield. I should have gone inside, packed my things, faced them, but something in me hesitated, a voice whispering, "Wait." It was after 10 when the lights inside flickered on. I leaned forward. Through the sheer curtains, I could see movement in the living room. Marla stood near the fireplace, her golden hair catching the glow of the flames. In her hands, papers. She fed them into the fire one by one. Letters, photographs, even that embroidered handkerchief Mom used to carry on Sundays. My chest tightened. I knew what those papers were. Mom's letters to me, her notes, the little pieces of her that had survived Walter's bitterness. Now they curled into ash in Marla's manicured hands. Then she lifted the last thing, my parents' wedding photo. For a moment she studied it, head tilted, and then placed it on the fire. Walter stood beside her, arms crossed, expressionless, as his life with my mother burned away. The reflection of the flames reached the window, throwing trembling light across the glass. I gripped the steering wheel until the leather creaked. My jaw ached from holding back what I wanted to shout. I could have burst in. I could have dragged that photo from the fire. But I didn't. Not yet. I turned off the headlights and sat in the darkness, the engine humming softly beneath me. "If you think she's gone," I whispered, "you're wrong." The flames grew higher, painting their faces in orange and shadow. It was like watching my childhood dissolve in silence. No yelling, no confrontation, just the slow, steady destruction of everything she built. When I finally drove away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked older, harder. The road blurred under the streetlights. I said her name under my breath, again and again, until it sounded like a prayer that refused to fade. Before turning the corner, I looked back one last time. Through the smoke, something caught my eye. A pale rectangle on the wall where her portrait used to hang. The empty space looked alive, staring back through the window. Her face was gone from the wall, and that emptiness stared back at me like an open. The morning after the funeral came in gray and wet, a light drizzle hanging in the air like fog that couldn't make up its mind. I hadn't slept. I didn't bother changing. The same suit clung to my body, creased and damp, still holding the weight of yesterday. By 7, I was parked outside the house again. My mother's house. Still felt strange calling it that in past tense. I climbed the porch steps slowly. The wood creaked beneath my shoes, leaving dark half-moons where the water pooled from my soles. I reached for the doorknob, out of habit. The brass was colder than I expected. I pulled my key from my pocket, same one I'd used since college, and slid it in. It didn't turn. I tried again. It jammed. I took it out, wiped it against my sleeve, and forced it in once more. Still nothing. For a second, I thought maybe the lock was just stiff from the weather. But no. Someone had changed it. Through the frosted glass panel, I saw movement. Marla's silhouette drifting from room to room, humming something I couldn't place. Something cheerful. It was absurd. I knocked once. It took a moment before she opened the door. She didn't smile. Her lips barely moved. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. "Walter's resting." I stepped in without asking. She gave a small gasp, but didn't stop me. The house smelled different, like lavender air freshener and floor polish instead of the cinnamon candles Mom used to burn. I walked down the hall, each step echoing louder than the last. My feet turned, almost on their own, toward the room I'd grown up in. The door was closed. I grabbed the handle, locked. "Why is this locked?" I asked, already knowing. "It's storage now," Marla said behind me, arms crossed like she was posing for a catalog. I stared at her. "You turned my bedroom into a storage closet?" "It's not your room anymore," she said, voice clipped. "We needed space." Something flickered under the door, a faint glow. I knelt, looked closer. A thin beam of light spilled through the crack. A soft, pulsing orange. A nightlight. The kind my mother insisted on keeping. She said the hallway always felt too dark, too quiet. Even when I moved out, she kept it on. It used to annoy Walter. He said it was childish. I stood up and turned to Marla. Where are my mother's things? In the study, she said. There's a safe. Walter thought it was better that way. Better for whom? She led me there. The safe was new. Chrome, digital, out of place in a house built before color TV. Walter's cane thudded against the floor before I saw him. He looked pale, thinner, but the bitterness in his eyes was alive and well. I made some changes, he said without looking at me. Your mother wanted simplicity. No confusion. Everything is in my care now. He handed me a folder, crisp and warm like it had just come off a printer. The first page was a will, new, dated just weeks before her death. Her signature was there, but my name had been crossed out in blue ink. She wouldn't have done this, I said, more to myself than anyone else. He didn't blink. She wanted peace. You've always been a source of division, Rowan. I stared at the document. The ink looked too fresh. I didn't trust my voice, so I didn't speak. I just reached for the acknowledgement form and signed it. My name, barely legible. Like I didn't want to leave fingerprints on this mess. My mother used to say, the house keeps what's true. But truth, it seems, can be overwritten by paper and ink. I left the study without another word. Outside, the drizzle had turned into steady rain. I stood on the porch for a while, the cold soaking into my shoulders. Across the street, Mrs. Daly, Mom's old neighbor, stood at her window, her hand twitching like she wasn't sure if she should wave. I nodded. Just enough to look normal. Just enough to say, I'm fine, when I wasn't. The roses by the front steps, Mom's pride and joy, had been hacked down to nubs. The cut stems bled sap like open wounds, like someone wanted to erase her from every corner of this place. As I walked to the car, I noticed something new. A sign, for sale. And beneath it, in clean professional font, Walter Keene Real Estate Holdings. I got into the car, wet and shaking, and sat there for a long moment. He wasn't just burying her, he was burying everything she stood for, everything she built, everything that connected her to me. I turned the key, wiped the fog from the windshield, and flipped on the wipers. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. You buried her once. Now you're burying what's left of her. I drove. I didn't plan to stay up that late, but the rain tapping the windows had a way of stretching time. I sat in the corner of my apartment, lights off, just the glow from my phone and the occasional flash of lightning outside. The living room was quiet. Too quiet. That kind of quiet that feels heavy, like someone's watching from the shadows. I opened my voicemail app, half a habit, half a way to avoid thinking. I scrolled through robocalls, pharmacy reminders, even a message from a dentist I hadn't seen in 3 years. I deleted them one by one. Thumb swipe, delete. Swipe, delete. Until I saw it. No name, no contact photo. Just unknown number, received 7:43 p.m. I hovered for a second, then pressed play. There was a brief static crackle, then her voice. If they ever try to erase me, remember who I was to you. It was her, my mother. My hand jerked and I dropped the phone on the couch. It slid between the cushions. I didn't move. I couldn't. My ears buzzed. My skin went cold. Every instinct said it couldn't be real, but there it was. Her voice, soft and sure, cutting straight through me. I dug the phone out and played it again. If they ever try to erase me. Her tone wasn't fearful. It was steady, measured, the way she used to speak when she knew something important was about to happen. Remember who I was to you. Click. That was it. But this time, I caught something else. A soft ticking in the background. Then, a metallic sound, like the dull chime of a safe door swinging open. She'd recorded this near something she knew I'd recognize if I listened closely. The timestamp on the message said it was sent the night before she died. I called the number back, straight to a disconnected tone. I tried again, same result. I tried blocking my number, nothing. It was like the number never existed. That voice haunted me the rest of the night. By morning, I was outside her bank. It was one of those small-town institutions, old stone building, green awning, the kind of place where tellers remembered your parents' wedding anniversary. I stepped in and waited in line behind a couple arguing about overdraft fees. When I reached the counter, the teller, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a nervous smile, froze the moment she saw my last name on my ID. "You're Elaine's son," she said softly, not a question. "Yes." She looked around, then leaned in a little. "She was here 2 days before, well, she said it was important. I shouldn't be telling you this, but she left something under your name." She slid a small silver key across the counter. "Box 19, you can use the room in the back." I thanked her, throat dry. Inside the private room, I opened the small metal drawer. My hand hesitated on the latch, part of me afraid of what I might find. Then I pulled. Inside, 2 things: a plain white envelope and a silver locket. I opened the locket first. Inside, folded into a tiny square, was a slip of paper. My mother's handwriting, neat, deliberate. Truth keeps its own record. My hands were shaking. I opened the envelope. There was only one item inside, a deposit slip, dated 6 months ago. It was for a joint account. Names listed: Elaine Keene and Marla Jensen. That hit harder than I expected. My mother had tied her finances to Marla, the woman who showed up at her funeral like she was already inheriting the curtains. The woman burning family photos in the living room fireplace while Walter watched. Why would she ever do that? Unless she knew something. Maybe she suspected Marla would try to cover her tracks. Maybe she saw it coming and left this for me. Not revenge. My mother wasn't wired like that. It was protection. A breadcrumb. I sat with it a while, just breathing, just thinking. "You were still protecting me," I said aloud, "even when I didn't protect you." When I finally stepped back outside, the rain had picked up again, a cold, steady curtain that made everything look grayer than it was. I clutched the locket in my hand like it might fall apart if I let go. Walter had rewritten the will, locked me out of my own room, pushed me out of her house, but she'd left this. She wanted me to see it. I walked back to my car and sat for a moment. The seat was cold. My clothes clung to me. As soon as I turned the key, my phone synced to the car's Bluetooth. The voicemail played again. "If they ever try to erase me, remember who I was to you." I didn't pause it. I didn't speak. For the first time since the funeral, I listened to her voice all the way through, without crying. When the message ended, I leaned forward, hands on the wheel. "You left me the map, didn't you?" I parked 2 blocks away. Habit, instinct, maybe fear. The neighborhood was still. Even the wind didn't bother to whistle through the trees tonight. Just the sound of brittle leaves scraping along the asphalt as I stepped out. I moved slow, keeping low, coat zipped up to my chin, the kind of cold that didn't just sit on your skin but crawled in under it. I kept my eyes on the house, on the porch light that had been replaced with a newer, harsher LED glow. It didn't belong here. None of it did anymore. I slid around back, fingers reaching into the lining of my coat where I'd sewn the old spare key years ago. I'd always meant to tell Mom I'd done that. Never got the chance. The lock clicked like it remembered me. I stepped inside. The scent hit first, not rot or mildew, just something unfamiliar. Lemon-scented polish, chemical air freshener. Her lavender was gone. It didn't feel like breaking in. It felt like coming home to a place that forgot my name. I stood there, in the kitchen, letting my eyes adjust. Everything had been moved. Cabinets repainted, that horrible faux marble contact paper lining the counters, the magnet collection from her fridge, missing. The hum of the old refrigerator was still there, though, low and steady. That was something. I moved through the living room. The armchair where she read the paper each morning. Gone. The coffee table my father built in '85, replaced. Her piano, the one she taught neighborhood kids to play, vanished. And the wall. It used to be covered with framed photos, vacations, graduations, birthdays. Now just nail holes and patches of off-colored paint. It was like they scrubbed her from the air, like she'd never existed. I pressed forward, every floorboard creak sounding louder than it used to. Past the hallway, near the staircase, I stopped. There, a sound. Not a creak, not a footstep, but a soft clicking, almost like a whisper of air. I tilted my head, trying to find it. It came again, from behind the wall. I remembered the vent. Back in high school, I'd hidden my report card there once, behind the panel that never sat flush. Mom found it within a day, said the house tells on you if you don't respect it. I pressed my palm against the wall and pushed slightly. A gentle click. The panel shifted. Behind it, darkness. I reached for my phone, flicked on the flashlight, and leaned in. A small room, narrow, dusty, filled with the scent of lavender that the rest of the house had forgotten. Inside were boxes, old ones, with masking tape holding them shut. On top sat a small wooden chest, etched into the lid in her handwriting, "For when I'm gone." My throat tightened. I carried it to the hallway, sat down cross-legged like a kid on Christmas morning, but with none of the joy. I opened it. Photos, letters. One by one, I pulled them out. Snapshots of birthdays, church bake sales, Sunday morning pancakes. Then, there it was. A photo I'd never seen. Taken just a month before she died. Mom was seated in the backyard, eyes tired but smiling. Standing behind her was Marla, her hand resting lightly on Walter's shoulder. She was looking straight at the camera and smiling, but it wasn't joy on her face. It was smug, cold. There was something in that smile that didn't belong in a family photo. I set the photo aside and reached for the flash drive tucked under the letters. Back in the living room, I plugged it into my laptop. Folders popped up, most of them filled with scanned photos, recipes, typed up memories. Then I saw one. Account proof. I clicked. Empty. 0 files. My stomach sank. She'd tried to leave me something, and someone, they, had taken it, scrubbed it. I sat back in the chair, heart pounding, trying to remember. Her words echoed in my head. Always keep a copy of what matters. I rushed back to the hidden room, flipping through the boxes more frantically now. Beneath a stack of old recipe books and a high school yearbook, I found a plastic CD case. A handwritten label in black marker. Backup. I slipped it into the laptop's disk tray, praying the drive still worked. It whirred. Loaded. Opened. One image. I double-clicked. It was her, Mom, seated at a table beside a man in a suit, clearly a lawyer. A document lay in front of her. She was mid-signature. In the mirror behind them, barely noticeable, Marla, holding up her phone, recording. I leaned forward. My breath slowed. My heartbeat didn't. That was it. She was there when it happened. When the will was changed. Not after. During. It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated. She wanted that moment saved. And then she deleted everything else. But Mom was always 2 steps ahead. I copied the photo to my phone, backed it up twice. Then I sat there for a moment, letting my breath even out. I'm not fighting ghosts anymore, I whispered. I'm fighting the living. I started to pack up, moving quietly, folding the envelope back inside the chest. As I stepped out of the hallway, something caught the corner of my eye. Light flashing across the front window. Headlights. A car pulled to a stop out front. I crouched low, peering through the edge of the curtain. Walter's car. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. The sound of tires crunching against gravel froze me where I stood. The headlights cut through the curtains and painted 2 sharp bars of white across the living room wall. My pulse quickened, and for a moment, I thought about slipping out through the back door. But the lock clicked before I could move. The front door creaked open. I knew you couldn't stay away. His voice filled the house, low and dry, the way it always did before a storm. I stayed still in the hallway, the light from his car still flickering through the blinds. His cane tapped twice against the hardwood before the hallway lights came on. Walter Keene, my father, looked smaller than I remembered, but somehow heavier. Age had stolen his strength, but not his authority. His eyes scanned the room like he was taking inventory of his own empire. He looked at the open box beside me, then at the laptop on the table. You went through her things? I met his stare. No, I said quietly. You did. That stopped him. For a second, there was nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock that hadn't worked since the funeral. Then he laughed. A hollow, bitter sound that filled every corner of the room. Your mother wanted Marla to have this house. You know that. She wanted someone who could keep it in order. Is that what you tell yourself? He ignored the question, his voice turning sharper. You were always too sentimental, Rowan. Always clinging to the past. That's why she didn't trust you with responsibility. I took a step toward him. She trusted me with her truth. He snorted. Truth doesn't pay bills. Something in me cracked then. Not anger, not sadness. Just exhaustion. The kind that comes from watching someone twist your mother's memory into a weapon. Walter's gaze dropped to the desk. His hand shot out before I could react, snatching the photo CD from where it sat near the laptop. Give that back. He smirked. You think there's anything on this worth saving? He turned to leave. I reached out, grabbing his wrist, but he slapped my hand away. The CD slipped, fell to the floor, and split clean down the middle. The sharp snap echoed louder than any yell. We both froze. I bent to pick it up. My palm brushed a shattered picture frame I hadn't noticed before. One of the few photos left of my mother, smiling under the backyard oak tree. The glass bit into my skin, thin lines of red welling up immediately. You break everything you can't control, I said, voice trembling not from pain but fury. He didn't look at me. He stared at the broken photo like it was an inconvenience, like it had spilled coffee on his carpet. You think I wanted any of this? He said finally. I had no choice. The will changes were for efficiency. She didn't understand how complicated things were. She understood enough, I said. You didn't just erase her. You rewrote her. He turned then, and for the first time in years, I saw something other than anger behind his eyes. Because she left me with nothing but memories, and I hate memories. The words hung there, raw and ugly. I stood, holding the cracked frame between us. You hate them because they tell the truth, I said. For a second, just one, his face twitched. Not fear, not rage. Shame. It passed as quickly as it came, swallowed by pride. I placed the broken photo carefully on the table and stepped past him. The air between us was heavy enough to choke on. I could feel his breath hitch as I walked by, but he said nothing. At the doorway, I paused and turned back. You don't even realize the war's already lost, I said quietly. You can't kill what's already recorded. He didn't ask what I meant. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't care. I opened the front door. The night air met me like a cold wave, clean and sharp after the suffocating silence inside. The door, once the same one that had locked me out, closed softly behind me. For the first time, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like taking back control. I stood on the porch for a long minute, watching the moonlight slip through the branches, listening to the wind move through the gutters. The house, even from the outside, felt alive, breathing, remembering. You can bury the truth under paperwork, under walls, under dirt, but it still breathes. And it was breathing tonight. The morning came slowly, drawn across the sky like old lace. I hadn't slept, just sat in my car outside my apartment. The broken photo frame on the passenger seat beside the letter I'd copied from the CD. I was still holding the weight of last night's silence when my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without a word. Mr. Keene? A steady voice, male, older. This is Harland and Roth, attorneys at law. I believe you knew my late client, Elaine Keene. I think we need to talk. 15 minutes later, I was on the road. Walter had called me 3 times already that morning. I didn't answer. There was nothing he could say now that would change what I already knew, and what I suspected was still hidden. The law office sat at the end of a row of red brick buildings, the kind of place that hadn't been remodeled since the 70s. I parked, grabbed the photo and letter, and walked in. The receptionist didn't ask for my name. Mr. Harlan looked like the kind of man who spent more time with paper than people. Tall, with graying hair, small glasses, and a voice that carried both caution and kindness. Rowan, your mother trusted us with some private instructions. She said, to give this to you only if her will was ever disputed. He slid a thick, sealed envelope across the desk. I stared at it for a moment. Her handwriting, neat and strong, still lived on the front. My name, no title, just Rowan. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single folded page. The ink had faded slightly at the edges, but her script was unmistakable. No lawyer jargon, no formality. If this letter finds you, it means someone changed what I wrote. You need to trust the garden, not the documents. Remember the corner where the white roses never grew. I always said, truth needs sunlight and deep roots. Love, Mom. Folded behind the letter was a small sketch. The outline of the garden I knew like the back of my hand, and one corner, the far left by the tool shed, was circled in pencil. My throat tightened. She knew. She saw this coming. I looked up. Mr. Harland had opened a thin file folder on his desk and hesitated, almost embarrassed. There's something else you should see, he said. What was filed with the probate court was this. He slid over a printed, legal-looking copy of a will. Typed, signed by your father as sole executor. Marla Jensen inherits the property and assets. Then he pulled another document from the folder, handwritten, notarized, dated. My mother's true handwriting again. "This one," he said quietly, "was what your mother had on file with us until the day she died. She left everything to you. This version was never submitted." I sat back in the chair, my fingers numb. "Is it valid?" I asked. Mr. Harlan looked pained. "Not unless we can prove the original was concealed or destroyed after her passing. What your father submitted is what stands, unless you find physical evidence of the original document or something that discredits the revised version." I stared at the two wills for a long time, my name erased by ink and replaced with another. "She left me a trail," I said, "and she trusted I'd follow it." Mr. Harlan didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence said enough. I thanked him and left the office, stepping into the brittle morning air. Snowflakes had started falling, soft, slow, and unhurried. They dusted the sidewalk like forgotten notes. Back in the car, I unfolded the garden sketch again. That circled spot near the shed. I could picture it exactly, where the rose bushes never took root no matter how often she tried. She'd once laughed about it, said, "Maybe the ground's keeping secrets." Now I knew she wasn't joking. I rested the letter beside the broken photo on the seat. 2 messages, one in ink, one in silence. She hadn't left me empty-handed. She left me with direction. I turned on the engine, letting the heater warm the cabin. The garden was waiting. Tonight, I'd go back. Not to argue. Not for revenge. For proof. If she buried the truth, I'll dig it up myself. The shovel lay across the back seat, dull metal catching the moonlight as I parked half a block from the house. I killed the headlights and sat still for a minute, watching the shadows stretch across the familiar lawn. The world felt suspended. No cars passing, no wind moving. Just the soft tick of the engine cooling and my own breathing. I stepped out, closing the door with care. The air was sharp, biting through my coat, but I welcomed it. It kept me grounded. Each step crunched against frost-bitten grass. I could have walked this yard with my eyes closed. I grew up here. I fell on this lawn. I bled on this dirt. I laughed under these trees. Every crack in the pavement held a memory. Every rose had once been tended by her hands. The garden behind the house stretched wide beneath a pale sky, silvered by the cold. The moon poured over it gently, like she was trying not to wake the dead. My mother's roses hadn't bloomed in weeks, but the scent still lingered faintly. Earthy, soft, stubborn. I knelt near the shed, right where her sketch had marked. The ground pushed back at first, solid from the freeze, but beneath the surface, it softened. 5 inches down, the metal made a dull thunk against my shovel. I cleared the soil with my hands, breath fogging the air. A small tin box, edges rusted, sat waiting like it had always belonged to the dirt. I lifted it slowly, brushing off the frost. Inside, wrapped carefully in one of her old embroidered handkerchiefs, was a folded piece of paper and a USB drive. The document unfolded with a whisper of resistance. The ink was faint but legible, her signature at the bottom. Notarized, witnessed. Dated 2 months before her death. My name was clear. She had buried the truth where no one could edit it, where no greedy hands could touch it. "You did it, Mom," I said aloud, barely more than a breath. "You hid the truth where only I'd know to find it." I sat in the dirt for a long moment, holding that paper like it was her hand. My fingers trembled. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The flashlight flickered. I tapped it once, then again. And then I noticed something else. a small red blink from the edge of the shed. I moved closer. A camera, discreet, mounted low, newer than anything else around it. The lens reflected my light back at me. It was active. Recording. Someone had been watching this spot. My heart thumped low and deep. I grabbed the USB, climbed into the car, and plugged it into my laptop. Dozens of video files appeared. I clicked the most recent. Static. Then a flicker of the garden, weeks before the funeral. The video showed Walter and Marla standing in this same yard, under that same moon. Walter's voice. "We'll make the change. She doesn't need to know until it's done." Marla's. "And the boy?" He smirked. "He'll believe whatever we tell him." The file ended. I sat frozen. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. Not anymore. I reached for my phone and left a message for Mr. Harland, my voice low but steady. "I found the real will," I said, "and something bigger." Before I left, I returned to the hole I dug. The roses there had been disturbed, roots snapped, stems bruised. I knelt and replanted one gently, packing the soil around it with care. Her words echoed, "Even what's buried can grow again." I stood slowly. My knees cracked, my fingers ached, but something in me had stilled. I wasn't lost anymore. As I drove away, the tin box rested on the passenger seat beside me. Inside it, truth, memory, proof. They had rewritten her. But she had buried the original story, with purpose. By sunrise, everyone in that house would know what she left behind. By the time the first light crept over the street, I was already there, standing on the porch with a tin box under one arm and a coffee in the other. The house looked the same as it always had, but something in me had shifted. I didn't come for revenge. I wasn't here to scream or beg. I came to return something that never should have been taken. I heard them before I saw them. Gravel crunching under tires, laughter that didn't belong. Marla's voice rang out like a bell too sharp for morning. The car rolled into the driveway like they were arriving from vacation, not walking into a reckoning. Marla stepped out first, sunglasses hiding whatever part of her still knew shame. Walter followed, dragging 2 matching suitcases behind him with that same smug posture he always carried when he thought the game was his. Then they saw me. The laughter died in her throat. Walter slowed, dropping the handle of the suitcase with a dull thud. I didn't move, didn't speak. I turned, opened the front door, and stepped inside, left it open behind me. They hesitated, but not for long. Walter barked, "You have no right to be here." I looked back over my shoulder. "You said the same thing at her grave. Full circle, isn't it?" They followed, boots heavy on the hardwood, dripping mud and entitlement. The living room felt colder than I remembered, though maybe that was just them. I placed the laptop on the coffee table and connected it to the TV. No introductions, no warnings. The screen lit up. Footage from the garden. Walter's voice echoed through the room. "She doesn't need to know until it's done." Then Marla. "And the boy?" And him again. "He'll believe whatever we tell him." Marla gasped audibly, one hand flying to her chest. Walter took one step forward, jaw clenched, but I shifted between him and the table. "Don't," I said quietly. "You've taken enough." He stopped. "You always told me to move on. Let the past die. But the past didn't let go of you." His face cracked then, not with rage, but with something older. Regret, maybe. Or fear. "You don't know what she wanted," he muttered. "She wanted truth," I replied. "That's what you never could give her." I reached into the tin box and pulled out the original will, creases still fresh from the earth, and dropped it on the table with a soft, final thud. "You buried her truth," I said. I dug it up. Walter's face went slack. Marla started sobbing, her legs giving way as she slid down onto the couch. Through the living room window, I saw neighbors starting to glance over, curtains shifting, heads turning. "You knew she didn't want this," I continued. "But you did it anyway. You thought no one would check, that I wouldn't fight back." Walter opened his mouth, but nothing came. I held up the will again. "I'll take this to court, but I wanted you to see her handwriting before the lawyers did." The silence that followed stretched. I walked over to the fireplace, picked up the broken frame, the one I'd left face down weeks ago, and gently placed her photo back inside. I propped it on the mantel like it belonged there. Now the house remembers her, too. Neither of them spoke. I didn't need them to. I walked out, letting the sunlight touch my face. The frost had started to melt on the roses, just barely, but enough to notice. She didn't want vengeance. She wanted to be remembered honestly. And now she was. I reached the car, opened the door, and glanced back one last time. Walter stood in the doorway, arms limp. Marla was still kneeling, face buried in her hands. "You said I was no longer your son," I said to no one, and to both of them. "You were right. I grew up." I started the engine. Weeks after the ruling, I came back, not with a briefcase or another plan, just a single rose. The court had validated everything. The will, the footage, my mother's truth. Walter and Marla didn't fight it long. They disappeared quietly, leaving behind more silence than I expected. Now the house sat still, wrapped in a calm that had been missing for years. The locks had been changed. The porch no longer creaked from restless pacing. The lies had gone with them, and all that remained was her presence, in the smallest things. I walked down the garden path as the sun slanted low in the sky, golden and forgiving. The air was warmer now. Roses had come back, blooming in rich reds and soft yellows. The earth had thawed. The bitterness in me had started to as well. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance restored. Her gardening gloves still hung on the nail beside the shed, faded and stiff from time. I ran my fingers along them and smiled. She'd always said the earth remembered kindness. Maybe it remembered truth, too. I found myself at the same corner I dug weeks earlier. The soil there was looser now, breathing. Right where I had pulled out the tin box, a rose had bloomed, tall, unapologetic, its petals the color of dusk. I knelt beside it and traced a leaf with my thumb. "You kept your promise, Mom," I whispered. Wind stirred lightly through the branches. From beneath the porch overhang, the old chimes she hung years ago began to play. I hadn't heard them since her funeral. Same notes, same rhythm. But this time, they didn't break something inside me. They settled it. I spoke out loud, not for ghosts, but for myself. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened. Turns out it just means not carrying it anymore. I placed the rose gently into the soil beside the new bloom, not as an offering, not even as a farewell, just as something alive, something carried forward. Voices carried from the yard next door. A family had moved in last week, a young couple with 2 kids. The little girl spotted me through the slats in the fence. "Hi, mister. Are you the gardener?" I looked at my hands, still smudged with soil, then up at the yard, blooming again under the evening sun. "Something like that," I said. She giggled and disappeared from the fence, off to chase her brother. I stood up and turned toward the porch. The door that once shut me out now hung open. I stepped inside. Lavender still clung faintly to the air, like she just walked through. On the mantel, the photo I'd restored sat upright, sunlight dancing off the glass. She was smiling in that photo. Not posing, not pretending. Just smiling. You can't bury love. Not under paperwork. Not under pride. It roots itself in quiet places and waits. Waits for you to come back to it. I stepped outside once more and let the screen door close behind me. The wind moved through the trees again, catching the chimes one more time. The same sound that once broke me, now let me go. She's everywhere here. Not in what she left, but in what she taught me to keep.